turn 20 degrees right.
Anyway, American 11.
The cockpit's not answering. Somebody's stabbed in business class. I think we're getting hijacked.
What's going on, Betty? Betty, talk to me. Betty, are you there? Betty? I think we might have lost her.
Air France 004, I do not have time to chat right now. Break.
We had to get control of the airspace. We had to get control of the sky.
American 49, you are directed to land in Gander. American 49, you do not understand me. You will not.
Is it on every airline? Is it only on a couple? Is it only in the U.S.?
You have been instructed to land. You will be landing in Gander. Now get your plane in line.
No, U.S. airspace is closed to all traffic at this time. The only options are Gander and St. John.
US 49, you are directed to land in Gander.
Listen, you're
US 49, you do not
landing in Gander.
understand me.
We've got
US airspace is closed. Delta 37, you will not be going to Cincinnati today. Break. US airspace has been closed.
My name is Dwayne Pottester. I live in Ganders, Newfoundland. It was just a regular day. I got up around 8:30. I think I drove by one of the local establishments there to pick up coffee and probably a breakfast sandwich, and just took my time, came into work. At that hour in the morning, it's very slow. So the guy that was sitting at the sector that I ended up in, he was working the whole airspace by himself.
Okay. She's on mine, Bill.
Hey.
I get in, relieve him, there's nothing going on. You got a few airplanes, but nothing much is happening.
I got this.
However, all the traffic was on its way across the ocean from Europe to North America. We know they're coming.
Gander Center.
My name is Harold O'Reilly, and I was the shift manager on duty during September 11th, 2001. I reported for work. It was a very normal day. Well, it was my 50th birthday, yes. The only thought I had when I went to work that morning was, oh no, what am I going to put up with this evening when I come home? Because usually on a 50th birthday, they always have a party or something, you know, with banners stuck up on the street. And as it turned out, that was the least of my worries that day.
American 96945. Affirmative, copy that.
It was a quiet morning, routine morning. Normally in the arrival sector where I work, we would have 2, maybe 3 people seated at that time of the day before all hell broke loose.
Dramatic pictures of an accident that has happened just a short time ago. You're looking at the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, where just a few minutes ago we're told that a plane, some reports are that it was a small commuter plane, crashed into the upper floors of one of the Twin Towers.
I was just sitting in the office. One of the controllers came in.
Harold. What's going on? You won't believe this. Come and see this.
So we go out to the TV room, and I'm watching a replay of the first aircraft, and as I'm watching it,
Oh my God!
It's not a small plane. It's not a small plane. A small plane wouldn't bring that down.
And when we saw the second aircraft,
How could that happen?
I think like everybody in the room said, this is not an accident.
What the hell are you doing here?
Now, the guy that I relieved, he came back in the building, in the ACC, and it was sort of like, kind of odd, really, and he had a strange look on his face.
It's on TV. Plane just flew into the side of the Twin Towers in New York.
Small aircraft?
They don't know.
And he was talking about airplane hitting the building in New York.
It's going to be a big mess in New York City today.
He was pale, and you could tell that he was in shock. He looked like he was in shock. Like he just couldn't believe that this was happening. We all sort of looked at one another and said, oh my, if these are missiles, we have 400 or 500 coming.
Gander Airport was originally a refueling stop and an overnight stop. In particular, during the Second World War, it was very important to allow aircraft to get from North America to the European continent. The airport itself is very large. At one time, we had a runway on the airport that was 1,000 feet wide. The normal runway today is 200 feet wide. And at the time, we had a runway that was 10,500 feet long. And Gander, at one point, was actually an alternate landing site for the space shuttle.
Gander ATC instructs you to turn.
Gander Air Traffic Center controls a huge chunk of airspace. Halfway across the Oceanic to 30 degrees west longitude.
British Airways 1503.
And the flights coming out of Europe, they all converge over Newfoundland. We're like the narrow end of a funnel.
So most of these aircraft that we're talking about are wide-body jets carrying numerous passengers, 200 plus. And we are the first to receive them and radar identify them and send them on their way to their different destinations.
6, you are identified. Say your requested flight level.
The altitude restriction here is 29,000 feet and above, and that's where all these aircraft transition en route back and forth to North America.
September 11th, 2001 was my first assigned shift as the National Operations Manager. The next event that occurred was the report of American 77 striking the Pentagon.
We're looking at live pictures of the Pentagon where there is billowing smoke. Jim Miklashevsky just reported that he heard an explosion.
I think people here in the building are already describing as a highly sophisticated, coordinated attack.
And at that point, I felt there's nothing else to do but to land everyone. We had to get control of the airspace. We had to get control of the sky. As far as we know, there could have been 100 aircraft like this. And all I could think of was, we have all these missiles out there that we have no control over whatsoever. My staff and I discussed endlessly whether or not the military would shoot down an American flag carrier carrying American passengers on American soil. I did not think it was possible. Vice President Cheney did give an order to engage aircraft after the last hijacked aircraft on 9/11 had crashed.
We don't know who's on those planes.
It is chaos. This has never happened. This has never been planned for. There was no training for the controllers prior to this ever to anticipate this happening. There's no room for error. We make a mistake, bad things happen.
I went back to the office because I figured that there's something going on. And I was not there very long when I got the phone call.
Gander control.
From the New York FAA supervisor who told me that American airspace is closed. You can almost feel a chill go through you. What do you mean American airspace is closed? After reiterating it 2 or 3 times, finally I had to accept that it wasn't New York airspace, it was the complete American airspace was closed.
Let me get the airspace.
Harold had got the word that the U.S. airspace had been closed, and he told us about it, myself and the high-level supervisor and the oceanic supervisor.
And they again looked at me as if I had 2 heads, and they said, that can't be, you can't do that. That's impossible.
It's closed, okay?
He had to convince us a bit. We said, this some kind of joke or what? And no, it's happening, it's real. And all the airplanes that were inbound off the Oceanic had to land at the nearest airports. Get ready.
Done, let's get it done. Dwayne does up top and all right, so take down.
All of a sudden, it's like you have this enormous task right on your doorstep. You have to cope with it. You can't turn around and go home.
So we said, okay, guys, let's get to work.
Harold walked down and looked at me. It looked like he was still formulating the plan in his head. He was like, I can't believe I got to do this sort of thing. And then he tells me,
you got to land these guys.
You think we're going to land all these guys?
These aircraft have to be landed immediately.
Bring them here. Whatever you can't fit here, Stephenville, Moncton, St. John's. Just keep them away from the big cities.
Okay, I'm going to land these guys.
Potential that any aircraft in the air at that point in time could, in fact, be the subject of a terrorist attack. And that air traffic control were bringing aircraft into the community knowing that there was a threat of terrorism on these aircraft. That was certainly a concern. We're a very small population, and you don't point the aircraft towards heavily congested, heavily populated areas. You send them to places where there's, if the worst possible thing happened, at least the damage is minimized. That probably doesn't provide much comfort to the people who live here to understand that, but I mean, that's a reality that does exist.
We were setting up arrival profiles in Gander, St. John's, Stephenville, Halifax, and Moncton. There was no favorite airline going anywhere. It was just whatever logistics worked out to the best advantage of everybody.
Now, I was the person who was the first voice contact with the aircraft in domestic airspace, and I had to deliver that message to each and every one of them. So how am I going to explain this to these guys, and are they going to believe me? Are they going to think that I've lost my mind? It was pretty scary.
We were just about halfway across the Atlantic when I was handed a little ACARS message that comes across via satellite. We can print out messages from the company, and they had sent us a message, which I've saved in my documentation of the flight. Message from Chicago Dispatch. 2 planes have hit the Trade Center in New York City. This is hijacking. Others may be in progress. That simple. Once we realized that there were airplanes involved in a violent act, then you had to make some assumptions. How extensive is this? How safe is my airplane?
Tom, grab the crash axe.
Take whatever means you deem necessary and I'll explain it later.
No one is coming through that door. Anyone does, you use it. Understood?
Understood.
Nobody is going to get past you.
Natasha?
Pilots weren't carrying weapons at that time. So I thought, let's do what we can do. Let's use the resources we have on the airplane to take care of ourselves. We might have even talked about using a fire extinguisher if we had to. Squirt somebody in the face, whatever had to be done, whatever it took.
The pilot came on the intercom, and in a very calm but serious voice, he said, folks, there's nothing wrong with this aircraft. He says, however, he says that there's been an incident in the United States, and the borders to the United States are closed, and we're going to Gander, Newfoundland. My range of imagination was from A to Z. I knew this was very, very serious.
Air France 004, you will not be entering U.S. airspace today. Northwest 61, I'm not obliged to tell you anything. Break. You do not understand me. You have been instructed to land. Delta 37, you will not be going to Cincinnati. Due to an event in the USA, you will not be entering U.S. airspace today. You will be landing in Gander.
Gander, Delta 37. We can't get through to our company. We need to stay on our flight plan route.
You don't understand. You have been directed to land. Cleared present position, direct St. John's.
They weren't going into Chicago. They weren't going anywhere. Finally, you got through to them. Okay, well, I guess we're landing.
On a regular day, these aircraft are used to just transition airspace and, you know, very, very structured setup. Now, they're being forced into an airport where they probably have never been before.
The oceanic traffic is typically your big iron, your heavy aircraft, over 300,000 pounds with hundreds of passengers on board, the wide bodies, your big Boeings, your big Airbuses, and Gander's not accustomed to seeing that type of traffic, and certainly not the volume.
American 49, Gander Center, squawk code 2401.
Gander Center, this is American 49 Heavy.
Go ahead, American 49.
The morning of September 11th, we flew from Paris, France, back to Dallas. It was a beautiful day. We even commented when we were over the North Atlantic what a gorgeous day it was.
As we're crossing the Atlantic, we have one of our radios on what is called Airborne Common. So that would be a means by which aircraft can talk to one another to try to get updates on weather, winds, turbulence, what's happening.
Say that again, please. Fire at the World Trade Center.
It was over the common frequency.
That's the area where we lost the airplane.
We heard somebody chirp up that an airplane hit a tower in New York City.
Atlantic inbound aircraft, this is US Air 27. We're receiving word from our dispatch that a plane has flown into the World Trade Center in New York City.
Oh, okay. Not necessarily alarming or anything at that moment in time.
You know, we talked about it and we thought, it must have been a small airplane. And then about 20 minutes later,
something came across the radio again that another aircraft hit a tower, and it's my experience from the military that I can recognize a coordinated attack.
all of a sudden we start seeing some of the airplanes turning around, making a 180, which you would never see that because the North Atlantic tracks are directional, they're one way, and nobody turns around on them.
And so my first thought was, hey, Beverly, why don't we consider turning this thing around and taking people back from where they came from? She goes, you know, that's not a bad idea. Why don't you see if you can begin that? As soon as I started to pick up the radio, we hear, we're common.
We tried coordinating a return to Europe with Chadwick Control. They denied clearance.
They're not approving any reversals. And I sat up straight in my seat and began to process. I'm not really worried about what's behind me, like a hijacking type scenario. At that moment, I was truly focused on what my end game was, getting this aircraft and the people on the ground.
Direct Gander descend to flight level 290 initially, expect lower.
Continental 23 Heavy, Gander approach. Descend and maintain 6,000.
Continental 23 Heavy.
Continental 23 Heavy, cleared visual approach, runway 21.
Contact the tower at 128.6.
In 2001, I was working as an air traffic controller at Gander Tower. My job is to get them on the ground safely. I was basically standing here receiving estimates from the guys in the center.
Well, we coordinate closely with the towers on arrivals.
Descend to 6,000 feet?
We bring them in 6 to 8 miles from the end of the runway, turn them over to the tower.
Continental
23 Heavy, Gander Tower, runway 21, clear to land.
Continental 23 Heavy.
Runway 21, clear to land.
Continental
23 Heavy, winds 320 at 3. Plan minimum
time on runway and utilize first available taxiway on rollout. Traffic on final.
And we had a lineup of traffic coming in from 10 miles. I could see 10 to 15 miles maybe of traffic.
It was a big deal getting those airplanes down without incident. A lot of the North American passengers knew there was a crisis. They knew they had to get on the ground. There was no time to mess around and explain things.
Where are we going to put these aircraft? Where are we going to put these people? But the main goal was to get them out of the sky, onto the surface, and that means using that runway, using those taxiways, any piece of pavement you can to park these airplanes and keep the flow going. You don't want anybody stopping on a runway. You don't want anybody stopping on a taxiway after they turn off, because that's going to clog things up, and there's a line coming. They're lined up on final.
I was here watching the aircraft land and then issue the taxi instruction as required on where I was going to park them.
Normally, air traffic control at an airport of this size does not get involved in parking assignments. But as you can understand, on September 11th, parking assignment became paramount.
Normal procedure is the ground crews would have a designated spot when an aircraft come in. That day, because the ground crew didn't know where the aircraft were going, they said, listen, you send the aircraft where you want to send them, and we'll make sure we're there.
Air Canada 849, give way to the Delta 767.
Speedbird 75. Taxi via Alpha to apron. Monitor ground 121.9.
I just made the plan as I went. They maintained listening watch on the frequency. They just went where I was telling the aircraft to go. Once he got on the ground, he started asking questions. Can you tell us what's going on? And my response was, I can't tell you exactly what's going on, but obviously it's a catastrophic event.
When we got on the ground, Captain Ballard came over the PA and announced to us that there had been a terrorist incident in the United States. It involved multiple aircraft and the impact of buildings. And it was a shock. I got pretty angry. Then I started to think, you know, what's our status here? Who's on our plane? Could they be suspects? Could they be tied to these other terrorists? I didn't know.
Once we heard all of the U.S. airspace was closed, we knew that we had to divert somewhere in Canada. So the most likely cities would be Montreal, Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary. You know, we had enough fuel to go to anywhere in Canada.
American 49, I am instructing you to land. Your options are Gander or St. John's.
Hey, Beverly, I asked, why don't we continue flying over to Edmonton if we got more than enough fuel to do so, and then once we refuel and they open up airspace again, we can just fly straight south home.
Gander Center, American 49 Heavy.
Gander, is there any chance that we can continue our flight to Edmonton?
I asked if we could continue and refile to Edmonton.
Normally when we are going to divert, the captain chooses the divert airport, and that day was quite different.
No, I'm sorry. I'm afraid you don't understand.
American 49, you do not understand me. You have been directed to land. I'll be back in 60 seconds. If the decision has not been made, I will make it for you.
It was not even up for discussion. It was an order to land in Gander. We normally don't get orders to land somewhere, but that day we did.
Air France 004.
They had major issues at the tower trying to park those airplanes because everything is happening so fast. And can we squeeze two more in? Can we squeeze another one in? And I'm on the phone to the tower and saying, how many more can we take?
How many more can you handle?
I don't know, let me check.
Dean, how many more can you take?
If we open up a runway, I could take another 15.
15.
It was a constant coordination with the tower. You were on a phone to the tower. You were coordinating with the high-level side as they're coming out of high-level airspace. You have a phone in your hand to St. John's Tower. How many more can you take? Take another 2 or 3. It was crazy morning.
Yes, you heard correctly. U.S. airspace is closed at this time.
Lufthansa 416, you are directed to land in Gander. No, you're not listening to me. There's a crisis in New York, and U.S. airspace is closed.
Runway 21 was the runway that all the aircraft that were diverted in here landed on. Runway 21 runs this direction down here. Everybody landed going this direction, made a right turn on taxiway Alpha at almost to the end of runway 21, and then back up towards the main apron.
Our biggest concern with runway 21 is the fact that at the end of the runway, for the last 1,500 feet, there's no turnoff. You have to do a 180 back taxi to the first turnoff.
They need to clear that runway as soon as possible and keep that aircraft moving along the taxiway, because there's your buddy coming right down behind you.
We're spacing the aircraft to give us sufficient time to get them slowed down and get them off the runway before the next aircraft was final. And in this particular case, I guess somebody was a little bit slower.
Sabina 539, Gander Tower, Ball 747, 1 mile final.
Because he was slower to get off the runway, he wasn't going to be off in time for the Sabina to safely land.
Sabina became in too hot, too heavy.
And if you don't get off the runway, he's not going to be able to land.
Oh, we're too close.
Sabina 539, go around, fly runway heading, climb and maintain 3,000. Sabina 539 and radar identified.
Maintain 5,000. Turn right heading 180.
Descend to 2,800 feet.
There was no particular plan in place. There was no time. You just had too much traffic coming that had to be dealt with.
They were just purging them out of high-level airspace, the high-level controllers.
We're going to be bringing in behind a 747 and a 22.
I compared it to a knot that was tightening. They wanted to get them out. The pilots wanted out. There was apprehension in some of their voices. They wanted to get on the ground as quick as they could. They didn't know, but there was more terrorist activity going to happen on their airplanes.
Delta 1-2.
The electronics couldn't keep up to the level of traffic that we had.
Lufthansa 446, estimating 1-4.
So we were doing a lot of voice coordination. The old school of just verbal estimates on which aircraft was where, who was following who. The cooperation of the tower controller and the controllers in Gander Center kept everything straight so that we knew which aircraft was which in the sequence they were for the arrivals.
This day was intense.
And in Gander, Newfoundland.
Perfect.
Gander agency instructs you to turn right. Air France 004, I don't have time to chat right now. Go ahead, American 49 Heavy.
When I finally plugged Gander into the computer, I realized that I was going to be 7,000 pounds over my max landing weight.
The aircraft that were not destined for Canada, they were going to be overweight for the arrival, and that's not a good situation. You certainly don't want to have an aircraft that's overweight, land on a runway, and then break the landing gear, become disabled on the runway. With all this extra fuel, they had to get down to their landing weight. One way to do that is to dump fuel. This is not something the controller deals with on a regular basis.
Harold, got a 777 that needs to do a fuel dump. Stand by, we'll get back to you.
American 49 Heavy, standing by.
Typically what happens is the aircraft is put over an isolated area. It needs to be high enough to where the fuel will evaporate before it reaches the ground. And they also need to isolate that aircraft and ensure that no other aircraft are going to be transversing the airspace beneath it with at least 2,000 feet.
You have to be careful as to how you're maneuvering the airplanes to keep them all clear of each other.
Reg,
Yeah?
can you set up a flight path for a fuel dump, please? Bet you half these planes are going to need it.
Got it. American 49, we're going to set you up with an area near Gander for your fuel dump. Stand by.
Copy that, Gander. Our mindset is to gas and go and to get home. That's the completion of the mission. But the first step in this mission now has been changed to landing safely and coordinate with the controllers to begin dumping fuel to get down to landing weight.
American 49, contact Gander Center on 131.8 to complete your fuel dump.
American 49, roger.
America 49, Gander Center. For fuel dump, proceed 50 miles due east, send 18,000. Commence dump there.
Copy that, Gander Center. Northeast 50 miles, descend 18,000.
They started clearing the airspace or making sure that they had a good area to send me to. So they basically just gave me a vector, and that was the heading I stayed on until I jettisoned the 7,000 pounds.
Commencing fuel dump now.
It's high-octane fuel. It's risky business. Explosion, fires, and then you're into a real catastrophic deal if that were to happen.
Seen this?
As much as it might shock some people, if you begin to dump fuel at the higher altitude you are, it disperses and atomizes before it actually reaches the ground.
Gander Center, American 49 Heavy.
Fuel dump complete.
Roger, American 49 Heavy. Fly heading 190.
Once the aircraft gets down to its landing weight or below, it will be resequenced to the back of the line and have an attempted approach.
They then vectored me onto a 95-mile final into runway 21 into Gander.
Air France 004, I don't have time to chat right now.
Decisions had to be made. There was so much information that you had to take in. It was too much for one person at that point.
It's a small town, word gets around. The controllers who were off came in on their own volition. Without being called, they knew we needed people. We went from the 2 or 3 seated that time of the day to 14.
Good to see you, bud.
It's good to see you.
They came together as a team, right? No rivalry, no animosity, no argument. Everybody pulls together, helping each other out. You know, if I'm, overcome with airplanes, you can take some off of my scope.
It was so gratifying and unbelievable that once word spread, we were actually turning down controllers who wanted to come in and work.
But you can't get too emotional about things.
Negative.
Even though you might be hurting, you got to cope with what's going on. You can't just get up and pull your headset out and say, I had enough.
It's highly orchestrated ballet that's occurring. We're getting prepared for the approach and landing, and that takes us down to lower altitude. It was interesting that this small base had a line of aircraft on final. It looked like Dallas-Fort Worth on a beautiful summer day at the peak of rush hour. This was not normal, and that we were landing.
Gander Tower, American 49, clear to land.
Normally, our final approaches are about 15 miles out, and mine was 95 miles, which made me one of the last airplanes to land. That was number 36 out of 38 wide bodies to touch down that day.
Okay, American 49, I'm gonna need you to pull a 180 and double back down runway 04.
Yeah, we gotta get some extra hands on deck here, because we only got, well, that's what I'm telling you.
We filled up the main apron first, just because at that point we didn't know how many aircraft we were gonna have.
Gander Tower, there's quite a bit of debris out here. Bit of a challenge for an aircraft of this size.
Well, I don't know what you want me to tell you. I got nowhere else for you to go.
Virgin 21.
I can see airplanes everywhere. They are all over the taxiways, they're parked on a runway, they're parked all over the area at the terminal, and I didn't know where I was going to be able to park.
There's an old abandoned runway in the middle of the airport that's left over from the Second World War. We parked some aircraft on that. And then at the last dozen or so aircraft that landed were actually parked on what was one of our active runways, because at that point we had nowhere else to put people.
There have certainly been that many airplanes at this airport, even more, but not wide bodies. And that's what was so unique about it, is we were all wide bodies. All the big guys.
My name is Barbara Fast. In 2001, I was the Director of Intelligence for the U.S. European Forces assigned in Stuttgart, Germany. I had a tri-band phone, which in those days allowed you to be able to communicate both to Europe as well as to the United States.
It's fast. What's going on? What can you tell me?
My office told me that 2 separate large commercial aircraft had flown into the World Trade Center.
Oh my God.
Shortly after we landed, I had a passenger come up to the cockpit.
Captain?
She was knowledgeable about the events, more so than the average person would have been.
Captain Bass appeared to appreciate getting the updates that I was able to provide. And I think in situations like this, you want to know what's happening.
We worked very hard to try to get her released from our manifest and then to find transportation back to Germany. She ended up leaving the next day.
There was a lot of security issues that had to be considered before anybody was allowed off an airplane. We didn't know how long the time was going to be. We didn't know if it was just going to be a logistical challenge at the airport, because we had no way of anticipating how long this closure of airspace was going to be, whether the passengers would in fact be disembarking. So when you think of people from all over the world, every walk of life, and every language, every race, religion, every medical condition, all the issues that we would have to address.
Right now, you can understand that based on what has happened.
So there was a lot of stress and fear, uncertainty.
I haven't heard confirmation.
And nobody had been able to disembark. In fact, they weren't going to be able to disembark for quite a few hours because there was a threat of, bombs on these aircraft, terrorists on these aircraft, and so on.
Today, because they're not going to clear this up, and they're not going to take a chance. Roger that. That's the last one.
After everything was over, just looking at the radar, seeing only two aircraft, two military aircraft, one in the west coast of the United States and one on the east coast.
It was airy, actually. It was not an airplane in the sky.
You're in a place that's busy all the time, and now there's nothing.
Radar screens were blank. Silence was deafening.
It was almost impossible to believe. It was very touching. See everybody just sitting back with a good job done. I'll always remember that.
Great job, Harold. Great job. Well done.
It was quick, a couple of hours of frantic action, and then the airplanes were all on the ground. I've never seen anything like it, never seen anything like it since.
There's not a plane in the sky right now.
These air traffic controllers were absolute heroes. They were heroes on this day, doing what they did. Never been done before, never been practiced, was even unheard of. For these controllers, this was their Super Bowl. This was their World Series, their time to shine under the lights, and they definitely pulled it off in miraculous fashion.
It was never a thought that went through my mind that we could not accomplish this.
I look at it as, a day that we could use as an example of how people just kind of work together and cooperate to get something done.
It was sort of a turning point in life somewhat. For me, it was like before 9/11 and after 9/11. Innocent people have been killed. I don't know sometimes where mankind can do what they can do. And then the other side of it all is the good side. They can rise to the occasion and counteract it, and hopefully the good will prevail.
It was like one of the most beautiful days I'd ever seen. Wonder how such evil could happen on such a beautiful day.
There was this inner voice telling me, go, don't stop.
I had no idea what had happened, but it felt like war.
The decision to run away saved my life.
At that moment, it just seemed like the world was ending.
His final moments It's probably one of the things that, even 22 years later, upsets me immensely.
There isn't a day that I don't think about it, and that's what I want.
I lost over 100 friends, but I have the gift of being here to tell the stories of their last heroic moments.
People come in with their patch and they want to be part of this.
We're taking that evil and turning it into hope, turning it into life.
It was a normal day coming in. I was in here by 7 in the morning, get ready for the day. It was a beautiful day. I am Michael Keene, one of the owners here at O'Hara's Restaurant. We're 1 block south of the World Trade Center, and they had the 2 towers there, part of the Trade Center complex. It was a hustle and bustle area. Back in the 80s, it was all Wall Street guys. You didn't have any tourists in this area. Everybody from the Trade Center would come through here at one point or another. We had the firehouse next door. We always had those guys and the local cops. But it was all businessmen, suits. And after 9/11, everything changed.
It was intimidating to see our little church and the 2 big towers. The back of St. Nicholas was 500 feet away. That's how close we were. I'm a lifelong parishioner of St. Nicholas Church. My parents, my grandparents, I had 4 generations in that church. When all the immigrants arrived from Greece and settled in Lower Manhattan, they gathered their money and purchased 155 Cedar Street. It was a small piece of property that was a tavern at that time. We used that as our church for almost 100 years, up until the time of 9/11.
We all were raised in a very loving Greek Orthodox Christian family. And my brother John, because he worked at the World Trade Center at Cantor Fitzgerald, he would visit the church. And he would light candles, and he would tell us about this tiny little church in the parking lot that he would go and say his prayers. We didn't hear from John on that day. He worked on the 104th floor. He left his cell phone at home. We tried calling his office, and there was no answer. Eventually, the phones just didn't even ring.
My name is Timothy Brown. I'm a retired New York City fireman. In 1998, I became a responder in the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management. Our office was 7 World Trade Center on the 23rd floor. When I went into work, I would always go to the 3rd floor where the cafeteria was. So that's what I did on the morning of September 11th. And I was sitting there in the cafeteria eating my Cheerios and drinking my orange juice and hot tea.
Salty and we started our day very early because I needed to prepare for a meeting. So I got to the Trade Center early, like around 7. We grabbed my elevator, got to the 44th floor, and then switch and go all the way up to the 71st floor.
I usually get to work maybe 15 minutes early. I headed to my building. I worked in Tower 1 on the 20th floor.
I was just preparing my papers. It was about 8:44. Salty was asleep. I remember I put the command print, and 30 seconds later, I heard this. Salty started running, and the building went. There was this huge wind and smoke.
The building swayed. It literally swayed back and forth. I looked toward the window, and I saw paper, all type of debris just raining from the sky.
I was on the phone with a friend of mine, James, in the Trade Center, and he said the lights dimmed over there in World Trade. And then some people came in the bar, so I said, let me call you back. They saw what happened and were a little crazy.
The power went out in the building. In a modern high-rise building in New York City, pretty unusual thing. I looked up, and the people who were facing the glass all at once jumped up and started running by me, going to the exit. And I had to grab one young lady by the shoulders and kind of shake her back to reality and look her in the eye. And I said, what happened? And she said, a plane hit the North Tower. And that's the first I knew of it.
I was heading down to NYU. It was the first day of a photojournalism class that I was scheduled to teach. I was within easy eyesight of the trade centers. I just wasn't paying attention until the fire radio started screaming that a plane's hit the World Trade Center. I looked up, saw what was happening, picked up the phone, called my office. They said, go down there. At that point, it seemed to be just an accident. I wound up following Fire Department Rescue Company 1. This big red truck clearing the path in front of me. I'm taking pictures with my camera in one hand, driving with the other. I had no doubt that the firefighters would go up, save lives, put the fire out, and walk away with a job well done.
My job was to go help the incident commander. We're trained as firefighters. Before you go into a building under destruction, you always try and get a size up of it and look at 3 sides of the building. I was doing what we do, right? What firefighters, police officers, first responders, our protectors do. We run toward danger while people are running away from it. I began to understand that my initial assumption was probably inaccurate, and that it was probably not a small plane with a pilot that had a heart attack and went off course. There was too much fire and debris. I still had no idea what was coming.
I really got very, very scared because there were only a couple of people who knew that I was there. Salty was running back and forth, absolutely alert. We used to be instructed that you should stay in your place, wait for announcements. So I started hesitating. Should I stay? Should I go? But then he came back and he just sit next to me, completely anxious. I realized he's telling me something. I have to get out of here. So I put the harness on him and we ran to the near stairs. It was completely packed. Everybody was screaming, It was full of smoke and very hot. And people were basically getting into panic.
8:53 a.m. is what time I got down to the Trade Center. It was totally unbelievable. There were papers flying all over the place. It was like snowing debris. People were showing up and just staring, just looking up. The realization of how bad it was up there was when people opted to jump rather than burn.
The movement going down became very slow because there were people from other floors getting into the stairs, so you needed to wait and let people get in. The stair was very narrow. With the door, you need to have like a space for 2 people or 3. The policemen and the firemen were moving up, and I am going down with a guide dog that has not enough space. It probably is too much for him. I say, well, Salty, maybe it is better for you to go. So I decided to let Salty be completely free. Salty continued his way down. But at one point, he decided, no, I cannot go without him. So he came back. He was telling me, I am with you. No matter what, I am with you. You and I together, and that's no question. Don't even ask me. Don't even send me back. I'm gonna be with you.
The moments that stay in my mind are some of the photographs I snapped. People were running. People wanted to survive.
Finally, we made our way to the first floor, which was just white with dust. So now I'm thinking, oh my God, bomb. There was a policewoman, and just as I was about to exit, she says, no, wait. She was looking upward, and then she said, oh my God, another plane.
I heard the second plane, and the South Tower just exploded. I hadn't even realized that I had captured that moment.
I had my shoes off, and I remember the policewoman said, when I tell you to run, I want you guys to run. Run as fast as you can. Run north and don't look up, don't stop, you just keep going.
I remember this one woman fleeing the building with her shoes in her hand, the look of a long-distance runner racing for the finish line with just that need, that desire to survive.
I've got my hand over my head because I'm thinking if anything is falling, I could protect it. There was this inner voice telling me, go, don't stop. I thought, who's out there taking pictures? Why aren't they running?
September 11th was my second day at the Pentagon. I was trying to see if I could maneuver through the building, and it's pretty difficult. You're going from one corridor to the next and one ring to the next.
It's very normal to get lost. That's why it's called, the Puzzle Palace. I was a procurement agent, and by bringing the supplies back and forth, it actually helped me during 9/11 because I knew the building. It's about 9:30. All of a sudden, my wife calls me frantic, telling me what was going on in New York. I told her not to worry. I love you. And I was punching up CNN like everybody else was doing in the world, and it was taking forever to load.
I heard that whistling sound that a plane engine makes. The whole building just shook, and it was just this huge explosion. This hot air just hit my face, and I shut my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, a fireball was just passing right beside me. Then the ceiling tiles fell on my hands. I got up out of my chair, I shook the fire off. and just looked around, and then there was just this really eerie quiet. Could see a window.
There was smoke in the hallway, and when I went down a stairwell, it was hard to get out. A lot of people were trying to get through there. The Pentagon was on fire. It was bellowing out. You could feel the heat. I had no idea what had happened, but it felt like war. I was so jacked up on adrenaline that I could taste the bitterness in my mouth. We just knew we had to get back in the building because we heard the screams. I could not walk away.
There was just no way out, trapped. Not knowing the layout of the building, I did not have a clue of how to get out of there. I just started to pray.
It was so hot, there was burning varnish, jet fuel. The noise was a roaring sound, and you could barely hear anybody. We yelled, "Hey, is there anybody there?"
I heard a voice, "Is there anybody in there?" And I called back to him, and he says, "I can't see you." I said, "But we're here, we're in here." And if that, the smoke and the fumes was just taking my breath away, and I'm trying to call back to him, but nothing would come out. And a voice in my head just said to clap your hands. And so I'm clapping my hands, clapping them as hard and as loud as I could.
She was burning. She couldn't scream.
I could hear the fire extinguisher coming closer. And so I just went towards where I saw the movement and just stuck my hand out through the smoke. And then there was a hand on the other side that just grabbed me and pulled me through until I could see daylight.
You could see the burns that was on her. She had burns here and in different areas and on her back. We gave her to the medics, and then we ran again.
You come out of the building and emerge from all of this disaster, and you look up and there's this beautiful blue sky. It was like one of the most beautiful days I'd ever seen. Wonder how such evil could happen on such a beautiful day.
And as the escalator moved me down, you could see more and more of the lobby coming into view. And I could see hundreds of firefighters awaiting their orders to go up. Someone yelled my name, and I looked over, and it was my best friend, Captain Terry Hatton, captain of Rescue 1, the elite of the Manhattan Fire Department. And he wrapped his arms around me, and he pulled me tight to his chest, and he kissed me here on the cheek, and he said, "I love you, brother. I may never see you again." After Terry said those words to me, he turned around, got his men, and they went in the stairwell, and they went up to save the lives of people they didn't know. But unfortunately, on this day, Terry didn't beat the odds.
I'm standing in front of the South Tower. You hear this loud, rumbling noise. I brought my camera up to my eye, was about ready to take a picture, when I decided to run rather than take that photo. The South Tower is starting to crumble. I have never run from any chute, but I was running. Hit the corner of Liberty and West Street and just got picked up and tossed like a rag doll. I was just flying. I was just launched through the air. Got thrown down the block, buried under a pile of debris. My mouth was full of debris. Every time I tried to take a breath, I felt I was choking. I really thought I was going to die that morning. The decision to run away saved my life.
The whole building was basically collapsing. We were able to reach the ground level, and hour and 5 minutes later, we crossed the street, and for one moment we stopped. I didn't see anything, but I heard everything. People screaming, crying. The helicopters, ambulances, fire trucks, It was amazing. It was 100 million sounds concentrated in one place.
I was able to find a vertical column, a vertical steel column that protected me. I held on to that column with all my might. As the Marriott collapsed around me and others, it blew my helmet off my head. The wind was so strong. You couldn't see, you couldn't breathe, you couldn't hear.
I had lost my glasses when I went flying through the air, and without my glasses, I can't see anything. I couldn't see my leg, which was badly twisted and broken. Even when I was squinting, it seemed that there had been a freshly fallen snow, lots and lots of snow. I managed to clear my mouth of the stuff and started calling for help. I don't know how, but a bunch of firefighters heard me, and even when the firefighters were carrying me, I was holding on to those 2 cameras. I guess I just wasn't going to give them up for anything. After they saved me, these very brave firefighters went ahead to help other people, and 2 of them lost their lives. It was unbelievable. This can't be happening in my city.
We couldn't figure out what was going on. We couldn't get information. We can't look into those cockpits. So it was very frustrating to sit back and watch one disaster after another without having some ability to control the situation. I felt something had to be done to get the safe aircraft out of the sky. I gave the order to land all aircraft at the nearest airport when I was informed that American 77 had struck the Pentagon. Obviously, we were mindful that it had never been done before, but to me, to land everyone who would take our instructions, obviously anyone who was left was highly suspicious and that the military could deal with. I'll never forget the energy with which the individuals ran to their consoles and to their communications equipment to transmit this order throughout the country. We would have taken steps immediately had any one of us had the inkling that this could be a group of terrorists that were acting in concert to take over planes and use them as guided missiles. We had another potential hijack. United 93 had shut off their transponder. We were aware that the military had been scrambled. We could actually see the jets streaking towards Washington, D.C. We were following, of course, the progress of United 93.
We're in uncharted territory. Is this the first part of a much bigger wave? We had no idea. Are there other airplanes that are still airborne that we haven't found yet?
As we looked at the jets, we wondered, would the military shoot down a flag carrier loaded with passengers? Of course, we had no way of querying the military directly to find out what orders they had or not at a time when United 93 was still airborne. Other than the hijackers, the people on board that plane were the only people in America who knew what was going on at that point in time.
The call came in, a large aircraft down in the Shanksville area. We were following the smoke trail. These were going to be critical patients. We were really concerned, are we going to have enough resources? IV fluids, oxygen. Did we have the hazmat team on the way? We were going to save as many lives as we could. When we arrived there, at first glance, nobody would have thought it was a plane. We found this very large hole where the plane went down. There were spot fires and plane parts everywhere. We did a very short search around the site, and we knew we couldn't help anybody on that plane.
That plane was going to come down one way or the other, and they took care of it. They took care of business in a way that we can never forget. Those guys are the heroes. And To be able to assess the situation like that and say, and communicate with other people on the ground, realize what's happening, and take the action that they did, that was just unbelievable.
The collapse, which seemed like it lasted an hour to me, probably was under a minute. There was a fireman who saw us in the rubble, and he was waving his light toward us, yelling, "Come this way." And so we all went toward him, and we got out. And I lived.
Suddenly I hear the building came down. We start running. Salty next to me, my hand was completely tied with his harness, and he was just opening the area, trying to open my bed. We keep running. There were thousands of people.
When we had gotten into Manhattan, the second tower had just come down. I had to put the windshield wipers on because the dust just completely covered the windshield. There was a lot of paper flying around. Fires were raging. It was totally horrifying. We thought that we would be able to start digging through the debris, but the beams were so big, we couldn't move them. We had to wait for heavy machinery to come in. It took about 2 weeks for me to realize that it wasn't a rescue mission anymore, that it was just a recovery job. Everybody who died that day, I just hope they went quick and didn't feel any pain. I cried many times. It just became overwhelming after a while. It hit you right in the heart, but I continued to do what I did as if it was a rescue job. If we found a bone or a piece of a finger, that would be enough for the medical examiner to do a DNA sample, which would be enough to give a family closure. You tried not to take it in because you knew you had a job to do, and you did it. You take everything that was in that building, the asbestos, the tiles, the marble, computers, fluorescent light bulbs, jet fuel. All that stuff was inhaled. Since 9/11, my white blood cell count is usually high, which means there's some kind of an infection. I have nodules on one lung, scarring on another lung, asthma, several gastrointestinal diseases. There's always in the back of my mind the thought of 9/11. I just can't get rid of it. Even when I'm sleeping, I have nightmares. But I still consider myself very lucky because I'm still here, almost 22 years later. A lot of other people weren't that lucky.
%40 of all the 9/11 victims were never recovered. And that is a startling number, startling percentage if you think about it. John was one of those. John worked at Cantor Fitzgerald. That's the company that lost all 658 employees. You know, not a day goes by where I don't think of John. He was only 31 when he passed. I often wonder what kind of a man he would have amounted to, because he was such an incredibly young man at 31. He was this life force, this incredibly charismatic, social dynamo that would make everyone around him laugh, like with tears. His final moments, it's probably one of the things that, even 22 years later, upsets me immensely. So I try to think that he fell asleep in the company of his coworkers, who I know were his great friends. Maybe he was saying a prayer.
I do volunteer frequently with the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. I want to talk about all the heroes, the cops and firemen, and civilians who stepped up that day to save the lives of innocent people. I am trying to be the best voice I can be for them and about them and for their families, because the 9/11 Memorial and Museum is a sacred shrine for first responders. And then as we do, we go to the local pub.
We reopened on April 1st, 6.5 months later. Before 9/11, there were no tourists in the area, and then after 9/11, firemen from all over the country, cops from all over the country, military guys were coming in here. Most of these guys travel with patches. It just, I guess, turned into a whole new thing about people wanting to put their patch up in here and, you know, be part of something. And now it seems like everybody knows.
When you think about the resilience of this church to remain while all the other parcels around it were bought out, and that just stood by itself, it just always made me feel like it was a special little church.
When the South Tower collapsed, it crushed St. Nicholas. We all wanted to be back on the site because we felt that that was our roots. This is where we were so many years.
People always wonder why it took so long to rebuild St. Nicholas. And I often talk to them about the fact that the memorial had to come first and the museum, and everything had its order. So St. Nicholas came a lot later. But you know, I find that everything happens at the time it's supposed to happen. What I do know is that after 20 years of mourning, St. Nicholas offers something more.
It's an amazing example of human resilience. It symbolizes the rebirth from an act of extreme violence and extreme hate, a rebirth based on peace, love, and welcoming everyone.
It's a memorial, a cenotaph for those people that were unfortunately not buried. We've incorporated many of these first responders, firemen and women, policemen, that sacrificed their lives on 9/11 into our iconography. And so this church is a place where we remember their sacrifice. And now we're getting ready to celebrate the most important time of the year for us as Orthodox, which is Holy Week and Easter. We're showing that good overcomes evil. Life overcomes death. We're turning this upside down and taking that negative, that evil, and turning it into something good, turning it into hope, turning it into life.
St. Nicholas, it's not just a place of prayer and worship for me. I always feel like John is there. you know, almost waiting for me to come. Because he's my angel, I can connect with him in this house of worship. The chapter in my life where we lost him, and the chapter where now it's time for something renewed, something new.
It's always been in my blood to help people. I now own Frontline Training Center in Long Island, and we teach everything from first aid and CPR to firearms, tactics, and any type of training that will help people. Sometimes it's a little hard to talk when you think about it, but Ground Zero, 9/11, and what we did down there. Time seems to go faster as you get older, but there isn't a day that I wake up and I don't think about it. It's probably the first thing on my mind. People are still dying from 9/11 related illnesses. We have the wall that we put up and the names of every 9/11 responder who died since 9/11 from 9/11 related illnesses are on that wall. We figured we'd do something a little bit different to honor the people who did the work down at Ground Zero, got sick, and then passed away. And unfortunately, every year we put another couple of hundred names up on that wall. I want to make sure that people never forget, because 22 years later is a long time.
Over the course of 9/11, we rescued 3 people, being brought out 63 deceased. And of those 3 people that we rescued, only Sheila Moody survived.
When I think about it, he was on the other side of the building. He got out of the building. He was safe. He didn't have to risk his life to come in to try to help any of us.
I just did what was the right thing to do. And I'd hope somebody would come and get me.
How are you? Oh my goodness, good to see you. Good to see you.
Wow, look how big she is.
Yeah, April. This 90s guardian angel.
Hi, April.
Chris is such an important part of my still being alive that I'm hoping, you know, when the first grandson comes along that we'll be able to name the first grandson Christopher Brayman.
I had a voicemail. Hi, David, you might not know me. You took a picture of me that ran in the Daily News on September 18th, 2001. I immediately knew who it was. It was just so good to hear that she survived.
Since 9/11, I am a little bit different. I don't like to go in Manhattan that much. I have some guilt as well. I ask myself, why? Why was I allowed to get out? And they were not. But I do feel blessed. This is the infamous bridge I walked across. I'm going to meet the photographer that captured a picture of me fleeing from the World Trade Center. I'll be meeting him for the first time.
We don't have a banner, we don't have a secret handshake, but there is a bond and a commonality and a, oh my God, we are so amazingly lucky.
David, I noticed you right away.
And that's a bond that just can't be broken. Last time I saw you, you were running a lot quicker.
This is actually my first time back here, so close, since the event.
The morning of September 11th, so many really good people lost their lives. We are a small, blessed bunch of folks who, by some strange twist of luck, managed to survive.
There's a lot of spirits here, a lot of souls.
Even today, when I hear the ambulances or the fire trucks, I get a little anxious. And Salty was the same way. Even he himself developed some kind of fear after 9/11. Salty worked for me for 10 years, and in March 2008, we didn't have a choice but to put him to sleep. I started working with this guy, but Salty will remain in my heart forever. Maybe one day it will be another Salty for somebody else, but I hope not for the same purpose of taking people out of terrible things like the destruction of the World Trade Center. I'm sorry.
I've kind of taken up a role of being a mentor to several young folks. A lot of them are missing their loved ones who would have been there for them.
On September 11th, I lost my uncle, firefighter Michael Boyle, out of Engine 33. I was 4 years old. Tim helped me out a lot with that, being a source of guidance, helping me figure out what I want to do. On March 17th, I graduated from the Philadelphia Fire Department Academy and officially became a fire service EMT. I have been waiting 20 years to be able to put a patch on this wall. To be able to do it with Tim, who's been my mentor, is a really powerful and meaningful moment.
I'll never get over it. We lost a lot of great Americans. I lost over 100 friends. My best friends, Terry Hatton, Patty Brown, Chris Blackwell. But 20 years later, I have the gift of the next generation and being here to talk with them, being here to tell the stories of their last heroic moments. You die twice. You die once when your physical body stops. But then the second time you die, when it's the last time someone said your name. And that will not happen with me or any of my friends as long as I'm alive. I will always say their names.
As I'm looking out at the people gathered here, a melting pot of people, which is really what our city is all about. That little church that once began as a source of pride and joy for the original immigrants now can become a source of pride, hope, and joy for not just the Orthodox, but for the entire world.
After 20 years of sadness and darkness, St. Nicholas is the light.
Good evening. Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda.
Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden has been killed.
America's #1 public enemy was dead, killed along with his bodyguards and son. In his not-so-safe house in a nondescript suburb in Abbottabad, Pakistan, where he'd been hiding in plain sight for years.
He was pursued by the most advanced intelligence and counterterrorism operation in the world.
Besides bin Laden's body, something else flew back with the Navy SEALs that had killed him. The hard drives from his computers.
The SEALs were able to get treasure trove of information.
At the time of their seizure, these were some of the most secret materials in the world.
We know, based on the letters, that the 9/11 attacks were not sufficient.
Now these hard drives are going to be downloaded, and the most notorious terrorist in history has his most private thoughts revealed. This is the Osama bin Laden the world knows. Stoic, armed, inscrutable. Pictured here in a photo found on his hard drives. But there's someone else in this picture. Me, Peter Bergen, one of the very few Westerners to meet bin Laden. I produced the first television interview with Osama bin Laden in 1997. We were given crude blindfolds. Heavily armed guys from Al-Qaeda drove us higher and higher into the mountains. Around midnight appeared Osama bin Laden. I'd expected this sort of table-thumping revolutionary, somebody who was super angry. He didn't come across like that. He kind of carried himself like a cleric. He was very low-key. He didn't raise his voice. He presented himself as this modest guy. The question is, was he really that in reality?
What are your future plans?
You'll see them and hear about them in the media, God willing.
Four years later, bin Laden delivered on that promise, killing almost 3,000 men, women, and children on 9/11. Bin Laden is one of the few individuals you can really say changed history, and I've spent much of my professional life since the mid-90s trying to work out who exactly he is. I thought I found out pretty much everything there was to know about bin Laden, but turns out that wasn't the case at all. After killing bin Laden, the Navy SEAL team recovered 5 computers, over 100 flash drives, DVDs, and computer disks, multiple cell phones, and a handwritten journal from bin Laden's Abbottabad compound. In 2017, the CIA declassified and released much of the contents of these drives to the public. Our whole lives are on our computers now, and I think there can be a lot of meaning in zeros and ones. Bin Laden never expected these hard drives to see the light of day, so really this is bin Laden unplugged. There are over 250 gigabytes of data, so sifting through this immense amount of files is a daunting task. So I need to enlist some expert help. So this is all the documents.
The mountain of documents.
Give us a sense of the scale of how much material there was.
The CIA, they listed that they had nearly 470,000 items.
Wow. Nellie Lahoud is probably one of the few people in the world who's read all the personal communications in these drives in the original Arabic, and she's writing a book about them.
Very much based on the internal correspondence, Al-Qaeda secrets, if you like.
Dr. Reed Malloy, one of the leading forensic psychologists in the world, who's consulted with the FBI for the past 2 decades.
Largely focused on threat assessment and threat management.
Dalia Mogohed, an American Muslim researcher and director of research at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding.
We do research and education about the biggest challenges facing the American Muslim community.
Ali Soufan, an Arabic-speaking former FBI special agent who was the first to find definitive proof linking 9/11 to the Al-Qaeda leadership.
This is a brick from a hideout of Osama bin Laden in Kabul. I get this brick to be a reminder of what happened on 9/11.
لو أن رسائلنا إليكم تحملها الكلمات لما حملناها إليكم بالطائرات.
Bin Laden was a man who was pretty careful about keeping his own secrets, but fortunately somebody at the compound had a home video camera. The cameraman for these home videos never shows his face, but looking at this arm, it looks like the arm of a young man, which leads us to believe that it's Khalid bin Laden, bin Laden's son, who would have been in his late teens, early 20s. This was the terrorist mastermind's lair. And what's so fascinating is this lair seems so normal. I'd even call it boring. Here we see a clip showing off the garden. Here his son helps a baby chick hatch. Here, a technical difficulty while filming one of bin Laden's speeches.
بعد قرار المحكمة العليا للصلة ستستكمل. بسم الله.
And then there's this.
من أسامة إلى أوباما. سلام على من اتبع الهدى.
Hardly the image of a terrorist mastermind.
وأن رسائلنا إليكم تحملها الكلمات. لما حملنا.
This is the most wanted man in the world. A man in the process of planning new attacks on innocent people. Appearances are often deceiving, however, and there's more to these files than first meets the eye. A large amount of videos were found, hundreds of propaganda videos. Surprisingly, a lot of American and Western movies like Ice Age, some Japanese anime, viral video downloads like Charlie Bit My Finger, a reported significant amount of pornography, and as well, the treasure trove of personal communications. The sheer number of people living on this compound makes it actually kind of hard to attach which person belongs to which particular file. There were at least 20 people living on the compound. Complicating the picture, bin Laden was using used computers, and so when the CIA recovered the files, some of this material may have been from a previous owner. For all these reasons, we need to proceed with caution about some of the conclusions we draw from these hard drives. But these files are still an incredible resource. One of the first questions we're trying to unpack here is, what was life like for bin Laden living here on the compound? He lived this very, very modest life. I mean, they were living like medieval peasants almost.
From reading a lot of the documents that were recovered, they tried to live a normal life. Osama bin Laden was in the hideout with his family, in isolation of the society that they lived in.
Bin Laden and his bodyguards went to considerable length to make this a fortified compound. There was very high wall around the compound, and everything was about staying inside the compound, not going to school, not going shopping. They were growing their own vegetables, they were raising chickens. They had cows. They burned their own trash. And in a sense, it was a sort of a prison of bin Laden's own making that he kind of checked himself into. There were a few particular files that at first looked like normal home videos. Maybe bin Laden's son just playing around with a camera. But when there's clip after clip of zooming in on the hills around the compound, or zooming in on the sky, or even following a helicopter, you start to realize that they might be on guard, on the lookout for anyone who might be looking for them.
In the context of bin Laden, we know that he was being pursued by the most advanced intelligence and counterterrorism operation in the world.
He knows that the whole world is looking for him. So he was always paranoid. The only way he communicated with the real world is through a courier. There is no phone, there is no internet, there is no telecommunication wiring that's going to the house. So at one time, Mahmoud, his chief of staff, said, Sheikh, it's very difficult for us to send couriers to people around the world. Can we at least use email? And Osama bin Laden responded, he's like, what are you talking about? Encryption? You want to use encryptions against people who invented emails? Absolutely not.
That means that everything we see on these drives that can be linked to bin Laden must have been smuggled into the compound on USB drives. One set of files seems particularly surprising. The CIA said there was a significant amount of pornography found on these computer drives. I mean, what do you make of that?
Nowhere in the letters are such materials requested. And they didn't have internet, so how could they really be downloading it?
I don't know if bin Laden utilized that pornography, but if he did, it wouldn't surprise me. Biology trumps ideology.
It's absolutely prohibited in Islam and I think most faiths. And I just want to point out one really important point here. Whether or not they were watching porn really doesn't concern me that much because they were also killing people. And that is far more prohibited by the Quran than watching sex.
We know that Al-Qaeda used pornography to send messages, so they embed encrypted messages in pornographic photos. There are softwares where you encrypt a message inside a pornographic video or a pornographic picture. When you have the code on the other side, that porn photo is suddenly a message.
You don't need to encrypt messages or use couriers if you're just planning a quiet retirement. He spent years on the run, and bin Laden believed the best way for him to reclaim the world stage was either to repeat or even improve upon what he saw as his greatest accomplishment, the 9/11 attacks. What do the billions of zeros and ones on your computer say about you?
Out, Charlie!
And what do they say about the most wanted man in history? Among the files found on bin Laden's hard drives, a striking number of them dealt with what he considered his greatest accomplishment.
I think everybody of a certain age remembers exactly where they were on 9/11, 2001. For me, I was sitting at my breakfast table getting ready to drive across Middle America to start graduate school. And I look up and see the horrific images on TV. To see this kind of violence was deeply hurtful, deeply enraging. And then to find out later that it was actually carried out in the name of my faith. It was actually harming people way beyond the poor victims that they targeted. It was also harming Islam. I remember it was the first time in my life that I was scared for someone to know that I was a Muslim.
The man that I had met 4 years earlier had just overseen the murder of nearly 3,000 men, women, and children. What could these drives show myself and my colleagues about the man who did this? Osama bin Laden's hard drives contained both incriminating data and glimpses into the banality of evil. The key question is, which is which?
لو أن رسائلنا إليكم تحملها الكلمات لما حملناها إليكم بالطائرات فإن الرسالة.
Here's bin Laden watching an old Al Jazeera documentary about himself.
Probably this is one of those documentaries that he thought misrepresented him.
He used to monitor this, and he used to monitor it very, very seriously.
He's wondering if those glory days for him would be something he would ever return to.
Bin Laden seemed to revel in replaying his greatest hits.
Interesting how he's sitting there watching satellite news. That gives you an idea about how much he was really concerned about his message and how his message is being perceived around the world. After all, during that time period, that's the only thing he has.
Bin Laden had more than just satellite TV to accompany him on his life on the run. He also had 3 of his wives and a dozen of his kids and grandkids. Looks like these are the grandkids.
So this, my sense is that's the oldest.
The grandson of Osama bin Laden.
He's probably almost 10.
Inside the compound, there was a different kind of Osama bin Laden, and depending on where you look, bin Laden seems more like a doting grandfather than a fanatical terrorist.
عندي حزورة نعم وهذه لعبة اسمها ماذا حدث هنا.
Sesame Street. So this is probably the kids were watching, right?
But this is clearly educational. It's translated in Arabic. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that they would have been watching this.
I think that's a terrible irony with bin Laden. The children can enjoy Western products, and at the same time, they could be taught to hate the West.
This contrast between light and dark runs throughout these hard drives.
There is warmth in the Abbottabad household. There were these poetry competitions that his kids were reciting, and bin Laden, their grandfather, distributed prizes afterwards.
But
there was no escaping the fact that the compound was no ordinary home, more like a minimum security prison.
One of the most important security measures is not to allow children to leave the house except for urgent necessities, such as medical treatments.
They should not be allowed to be in the yard unless they have an adult with them to control their noise. There was physiological deprivation. There was isolation from other individuals, including other children. There was likely no opportunity for these children to have any kind of socialized experience, what kids deserve and what they need. This boy looks bored with trying to play in an environment of squalor.
Khalid bin Laden would take one of the grandkids into the yard and show him how to use a BB gun and shoot at birds and capture this all on home video, seemingly in an effort to try and pass the time. There's a bird in this tree. Looks like they shot it out of the tree.
Oh, that's the bird that was shot.
They shot the bird. Yeah.
Seems to be alive still. Oh, the poor thing. Seems to be the grandson.
Yeah. Shot it in the head.
Now they're enjoying Now they're indulging, I should say.
Bin Laden's obsession with a life of violence and murder seemed to be spreading to the children who were living with him. Beyond the compound walls, his violent ideology was also taking hold, with horrific consequences.
These are like child soldiers being forced into combat.
These files give us a roadmap into the mind of a mass murderer, but they also illuminate how he seized the imagination of so many disciples. So what about him inspired this devotion? When I met bin Laden in 1997, I was struck how the son of one of Saudi Arabia's wealthiest families was living this very modest life. He had abandoned luxury, and he was living just like one of his own foot soldiers.
A lot of these guys who joined Osama bin Laden, a lot of the Qaeda members, being humble is something that they didn't see in leaders, where they came from. Being humble is something that they read in history books about the Prophet, about the companions. And Osama bin Laden dressed like the Prophet and the companions and acted like the Prophet and the companions. And for them, they saw humility that they never seen.
أمام جماهير الأمة وكأنه يتحدث من علو عندما يتحدث عن الطواغيت. In this letter, bin Laden is suggesting about how the jihadi leaders must address the public in their public statements when they are presenting public statements. And it is important that the spokesman avoid being pompous or arrogant.
It's interesting how important humility is in the Muslim character. Muslims are taught that one of the worst sins is arrogance. So it is interesting to note how humble bin Laden projected himself to be.
But the hard drive data illuminates a contradiction here. Bin Laden lived a very calculated life, fully aware that he was on stage at all times.
وطغيان رأس المال.
On screen, he was a self-conscious performer, and the files show how hard he worked to maintain his image.
You can read in some of the documents that recovered in his house that he was so much into his looks.
On the compound, he was using hair dye to dye his beard, to kind of maintain a youthful appearance. Despite his sort of humble affect, he was very conscious about his own image and how he presented himself to the world. And ultimately, he seemed like something of a narcissist.
Narcissism is the felt quality of perfection. One of the striking things about these videos was the videos where he would make errors in his speech and they would cut and then he would start again.
He would often record multiple takes of his speeches so he could get it perfect.
لدعم ومناصرة الإسرائيليين على قتل أهلنا واحتلال أرضنا. وطغيان رأس المال.
Bin Laden seemed to have a physical tic every time he made a mistake, a quiet cue to cut.
The narcissism is veiled by a soft-spoken manner. He recognized that being humble was actually very commanding for him.
He was obsessed with his public image. The videos recovered from his compound include many copies of documentaries and news shows about bin Laden that he seemed to closely monitor.
What do you make of Osama bin Laden's statement today?
An audio tape from Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden. And do you know where I can find Osama bin Laden?
Where in the world is Osama bin Laden?
If we watch closely, we can even discern bin Laden's TV viewing habits. He seemed to curate for himself what he did and didn't want to see. A clue to this is how he watched TV news footage. If a female TV newscaster came up on his TV, he'd take his remote and kind of flip up the satellite channel finder so it covered her face. And when she disappeared, he would turn it down and put it back onto a normal screen.
If there is other photos, press conference by President Obama or anything else, he pressed the menu button. So he doesn't want to see anything else but Al-Qaeda and but himself.
The hard drive contained a lot of videos of extreme violence, which bin Laden may well have been monitoring, but many of which are so violent that we can't even show them to you. Countless propaganda videos, many beheading videos, even a video of a young boy in Iraq beheading a hostage, a video of a group of kids kicking at the dismembered leg of an American soldier and celebrating, chanting, "Death to America."
It is robbing them of their innocence. These are like child soldiers being forced into combat.
That is his mentality. He was totally blinded by his war.
Bin Laden did much more than simply watch violence. He was obsessed with inflicting more of it on the world.
We know, based on the letters, that the 9/11 attacks were not sufficient. He wanted something bigger and larger with much more impact.
While bin Laden was certainly on the run, he was trying to retain control of his organization, and he was also trying to recreate what he saw as his greatest accomplishment, 9/11. He thought that the bigger the attack, the more the Americans would finally pull out of the Middle East.
That the American public would start voting for people who would have different foreign policy.
I think that was a very naive view.
Absolutely.
I mean, after 9/11, the United States got more engaged in the Middle East than it's ever been in its history. So it completely backfired.
He's delusional, and he's a dreamer.
What drove bin Laden's hatred for the United States and the West?
أنا هل بلغت اللهم فاشهد أنا هل بلغت اللهم فاشهد أنا هل بلغت
اللهم فاشهد والسلام عليكم ورحمة.
It's impossible to understand bin Laden without reference to his religious beliefs. This was a guy who, when he was a teenager, was praying 7 times a day, fasting twice a week. On the other hand, he was also a mass murderer. What was his relationship to religion? Given how religious bin Laden saw himself, it's not a surprise there's a lot of religious material on these drives.
How great is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
He would often recite verses from the Quran in his letters. He would refer to sayings of the Prophet Muhammad in his speeches.
He thinks he's religious. He thinks he was doing the right thing.
But he was not a religious authority. He was not a graduate of a seminary or any kind of traditional religious training. And so we have someone who's a non-specialist making unorthodox interpretations of the faith. Because he actually starts by acknowledging that Islam prohibits the killing of non-combatants in warfare. But then goes on to explain in his mind why the political situation that we are living in allows him to violate that rule. What he did was to use political justifications to violate a religious edict.
This homemade video found on the hard drives begins, as many of these Al-Qaeda videos do, by quoting a religious verse with chanting in tandem, and then the message becomes clear. We hit the United States and we scared them. Then, inevitably, bin Laden himself speaks, preaching to his followers.
And I think it's a really telling piece of propaganda, how it weaves together religious imagery to superimpose them on the tactics and actions of Al-Qaeda.
This homemade propaganda was crude, but tragically, it was also effective.
He was using religion as a tool. Is a mean to control people, to make people do whatever you want them to do, and the end justify the mean, like any psychopath justify anything. I mean, at one point, he actually told his commanders, don't shy away from shedding blood. You know, if you look at the crusade, do you think Christianity is a crusade? No, the same thing. It's people using religion to obtain political goals.
I think it's tragic that we let a criminal define the religion of 1.8 billion people. We would never take the word of the KKK to define Christianity. It would be ludicrous. It would be offensive. If the Quran is a recipe book and it called for a tablespoon of sugar in the recipe, an extremist would read that and put a cup of sugar instead. So taking what the Quran says and taking it to its extreme. Bin Laden didn't do that. He read in the Quran, you need a tablespoon of sugar, and instead he put a cup of cyanide. That's not an extremist. That's a deviant revisionist.
Bin Laden's view of his religion and violence extended to his own family. Terrorism was the family calling, and he was willing to sacrifice even those closest to him for his self-styled holy war. Bin Laden fathered some 20 children throughout his life. A half dozen were with him in the Abbottabad compound, along with another half-dozen grandchildren. He was also accompanied by 2 of his 4 wives, one of which had a surprising role on the compound.
The very first letter that arrived from the CIA's declassification is actually by his wife, Siham. The first thing that she writes to her daughter, I write to you in haste because I'm really busy with your father preparing his public statements.
And Siham wasn't the only wife who was helping. With less than a year left to live, bin Laden was joined by the oldest of his 4 wives, Korea, also known as Hamza.
His letter to Khayriya when she was still in North Waziristan.
This is the oldest wife.
The oldest wife. In that letter, he says something to the effect that I sent the brother on your end money to buy you a computer, and I'm also sending you everything that I've got on my computer to help us with writing the public statement for the anniversary of 9/11.
So he was asking her to review his statements and
send me any ideas that you have.
So that indicates that Hamza was, in a way, his wordsmith. He needed her for the message.
So yes, it is surprising that many of those public statements that bin Laden delivered to the world were actually written, or at least co-authored, by his wife.
وتذكروا أنكم في أطول حروبكم على الإطلاق ومع مغيب شمس كل يوم تخسرون القروش وتكسبون النعوش.
You don't see that with other terrorist leaders.
there was definitely some level of respect there. Bin Laden was looking for guidance. And at the same time that he was getting help from his wives to write his speeches, he was also heavily influencing the kids who were living on the compound.
خطمنا في الجهاد خطا فساحة وقاتلنا ولم نلق السلاح ولما أيام كأجواف الليالي فقدنا النجم والقمر الرياح قضيناها حيال الحرب نخشى بقاء الرق أو نرجو الصراحة فشدت من قوى قوم مراض عزائمهم فردتها صحاحة وبالقرآن هو لنا حياة نرى فيه السلامة والفلاح.
I mean, it's clear that he's being indoctrinated at such a young age in this way, and it's extremely heartbreaking.
God, it's scary, but that's just another indication that, you know, for Osama bin Laden, the only thing that matters is the cause.
He's recording this video in front of the same wall as bin Laden.
What makes them happier than this kid memorizing a poem about jihad and about war to make bin Laden happy?
I absolutely see this young man as a victim, this child, and along with it, probably everyone else in the compound.
We see in that video a young boy reciting a poem as a jihadist warrior, and then we also see that boy smiling at somebody off camera, and that tells me that it was likely that he was receiving at least nonverbal praise from whoever was off camera as he did that.
As the walls began to close in on bin Laden, his paranoia began to extend even to his own family.
I was told that you went to a dentist in Iran and you were concerned about a filling she had put in for you.
Bin Laden was concerned about one of his wives who was under house arrest in Iran for a long period of time, that she might have a tracking device planted in her teeth by the Iranians.
The size of the chip is about the length of a grain of wheat and the width of a fine piece of vermicelli.
This was a really high level of paranoia, but of course he had reasons to be paranoid. He's the world's most wanted man. And on top of the paranoia, the safe space that bin Laden had built was starting to crumble. In the final months when he was alive, the 2 bodyguards who were his only conduit to the outside world were beginning to turn on him.
Sadly, I came to realize that they have reached a level of exhaustion, that they are shutting down, and they ask to leave us all.
There's an irony here, which is bin Laden is the leader of this global terrorist organization, and yet it looked like he was going to lose the 2 bodyguards who were his main connection to the outside world. Day by day, bin Laden's world began to constrict. The walls were closing in around him. This particular paranoid did have real enemies, and those enemies were slowly drawing near.
So he was even planning to move, apparently, to a different location. and the Navy SEALs took him down.
But who really was the man behind those walls? The drives could only tell me so much. My journey started with an interview, and now it needs to end with two more, with two men who can give us a whole new perspective on what we found on these hard drives.
Osama, what the hell? What happened to him become like that?
Warrior, leader, actor, family man, mass murderer. Osama bin Laden, like his hard drives, contained multitudes. A forensic search for the real Osama bin Laden by sifting through his words, images, and home videos can only get us so far. Now I want to take it a step further and discuss what we found with two men who knew him well. Abdullah Anas fought side by side with bin Laden in Afghanistan, was one of his closest friends in the 1980s. And Abdul Bari Atwan is the only journalist who has spent days with bin Laden at his mountain stronghold. What was your impression of him as a person?
To be honest, as a person, he impressed me. He was modest by nature. He wasn't actually acting for it to impress me.
What was he like?
Ordinary guy for me. I recognized many positive sides of Osama, which is he talks less, he knows what to say, he knows how to say it, but he's humble.
So what was Osama like with his family?
Osama, it's someone you feel it's close to his sons, his children.
In the computer, what we found is that the two wives, the two older wives, were helping him with his speeches. So you surprised by that?
They were scholars, they were highly educated, they got PhD.
Yeah.
So, and they believed in him. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they actually help him.
وطغيان رأس المال وطغيان رأس المال.
What was Osama's relationship with religion?
With faith or with religion?
Both.
You can maybe sometime find someone faithful, less religious, and someone completely religious but not faithful. The most important to be faithful.
Yeah.
When you are faithful, let alone you are Muslim or non-Muslim, the faith lead you to the honesty, lead you to be peaceful. Osama still remember some moment of his faith. What the hell, what happened to him become like that? I don't know. I don't know.
Sometimes that's the only answer. He's a strange combination of things because he's this modest, retiring, humble, soft-spoken guy. Yet, you know, he's killing thousands of people, civilians. So what is that?
Complicated.
Yeah.
To be honest, it never occurred to me. This man actually will be the most dangerous wanted man on earth. And I don't believe he wanted to be that.
This is one of bin Laden's grandsons.
خطونا في الجهاد خطا فساحة وقاتلنا ولم نلقي السلاح ولما سلت البيض الماضي تقلدنا لها الحق الصراحة أيام كأجواف الليالي فقدنا النجم.
You know the conclusion I reached now. The main challenge is not to make these generations ready for fight.
To be martyred.
To be martyred.
So it's easy to recruit somebody to become a martyr.
Yes.
What the harder thing
But
is what?
The harder part, teach him how to build peaceful society.
So what's bin Laden's legacy? It's a lot of violence and kind of meaningless violence. He also blew up his own family. A number of his children have been killed in the years since 9/11. Many of his associates are dead or in prison or have disappeared. Certainly hasn't created a more safe world or more stable Middle East.
I think his legacy is a legacy of death, the legacy of destruction.
Leaving a trail of broken lives.
And today, Al-Qaeda has way more people who adhere to the philosophy and the ideology and the narrative of Osama bin Laden than they had on 9/11. I believe ISIS is part of the bin Ladenism. And the Navy SEALs took down the messenger, but the message still lives.
On the other hand, bin Laden's ideas have been firmly rejected by 99.9% of Muslims around the world.
When you look into what's happening in the Arab Spring, you don't see Al-Qaeda flag, you don't see bin Laden's photo, you see people who want democracy. You know who hate democracy? You see people who want freedom. You know who hate freedom in the political sense? Osama bin Laden.
He sent a lot of other people to their deaths. He didn't die a heroic holy warrior on the front lines. He ended up in a pretty comfortable compound surrounded by his wife and family. Kind of ended with a whimper as opposed to a bang. Osama bin Laden's digital files left behind an imprint, and we're left to determine the meaning. How do you feel about him now?
I think he will end up as a footnote in history.
He was a complex personality.
I absolutely feel that bin Laden hurt Muslims.
You have to hold this quiet, respectful manner to other people at the same time that he was a global terrorist.
Osama bin Laden is not the first one of history who declared war against the established orders of the time, and he won't be the last.
When you come to responsibility, when you come to the blood of innocent, there is no gray area.
Yeah.
Even you are my friend, I still remember you are humble, you are nice, you are honest. That all will go when you commit one drop of innocent blood. Huh?
Bin Laden is one of the few people who can say changed the course of history, but he did not leave the world a better place. And he'll be remembered for that.
Whenever you're ready. Okay.
This mural was painted for the firefighters, the EMS, and the NYPD, and it was a beautiful thing that the guys did for trying to help all the families who are missing people. I just want to send the message out to my wife, Carmen, I love you, and we can't wait for you to come back home. Bye.
We met in junior high school. I was 13, she was 11. Childhood sweethearts. She loved sunflowers. And I always made sure that she had fresh flowers every week at her desk. I even set up an account with a flower company up here that would send them to the city. Carmen is the girl who grew up in the projects, raised on welfare, and made it. Worked her way to vice president of a global company, corner office in one of the most prestigious buildings in the world.
Mom, right here, right here, right here.
December.
She couldn't get restructured. All right, that's all right. Old Navy. I needed a new sweater.
Yeah, there you go.
Isn't that pretty? And it's not checkered.
Non-checkered.
Mom, open yours. Open yours. Mom's looking for the way it goes. Oh, here it goes.
Oh yeah, and then you tie it around your neck.
No, open that. You're not supposed to yet.
I got your earrings, and I got your necklace to go with it. And the good thing about it is you can put a suit over it, and it'll look like this. Or you can put it just like hoochie.
The hoochie. On video. Hoochie mama. You know. All right, Dad.
We were young. She was 33. I was 35.
Open it.
You know, she was fun. She had an infectious laugh.
Take a shot.
She was there for everyone.
Say it again. Say it again. You heard me. No, you did.
She made everybody happy.
What'd you say?
Very family oriented.
Come here, let me see.
We loved each other. We have beautiful kids. That was the beginning of our, you know, homeowners, raising our kids in a beautiful home. We had a great life.
We'll turn you back on after we had a couple of drinks.
All news, all the time. Good morning. 64 degrees at 8 o'clock. It's Tuesday, September 11th. I'm Lee Harris. Here's what's happening. It's primary day, and the polls are open in New York City. Voters are deciding among
Tuesday. I dropped Carmen off on 178 and 4 Washington. And she gives me a kiss. Closes the door, then she opens up the door again. And she says, give me a real kiss. Little did I know that would be the last time I would ever see or kiss her.
If you're just tuning in, breaking news here on 1010 Wins. A plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. This happening just a matter of minutes ago. An aircraft, we're not sure of the make of the aircraft. Apparently a direct hit into one of the Twin Towers. Let's get this live update from 1010 Wins correspondent Joan Fleischer. Joan, what do you see?
I'm looking at the World Trade Center, and there's a huge hole in it, and there's a fire in the building right now. Huge smoke pouring out of it, and things are falling from the building itself. It's about maybe a quarter from the top of the building, a huge hole in the building.
The phone rings, and it's Carmen. And she said that there was an accident. I said, are you okay? She goes, yeah. A plane went into Tower 1. And I said, what? And she's like, a plane went into Tower 1. I'm just calling you to tell you I left my cell phone and my purse upstairs. I'm calling you from a coworker's phone. I was like, all right, I'm on my way. I ran out of there, get in my car.
That's right, Lee. Anything going into the World Trade Center is going to be closing down for only the passes of emergency apparatus. And, of course, anything coming into Lower Manhattan is also probably going to be off limits to you, or should be at this point, because we need as much.
Couldn't get towards the World Trade. I park my car on Hudson and Canal, and I run down there.
now another explosion occurring right at this moment in the other building, which means debris has come from the airplane.
It appears another plane just flew into
another
the tunnel.
plane went clear into the building. My God, I can't believe it.
Two towers, the south tower of the World Trade Center has just collapsed.
I didn't know there was more than one plane. I didn't know that her building got hit and that it fell.
What came down? The crash. The other Trade Center's down. It's down. It's down. What's down?
When I finally got there, I'm looking at the sky. It's different. It's like her building's not there.
Right here.
Everything's running through your mind. Like, where is she? Where's my wife? Where's her building? Where my kids? Like, everything just runs through your mind in a split second. What the hell? And I'm not realizing that the other building is coming down while I'm on the sidewalk. All of a sudden, I feel a huge hit on the side. It was a cop that grabbed me and started running. He tells me, "What are you doing out here?" And I said, "Where's my wife? Where's her building? What happened?" And it's like, that we were attacked. And I'm like, no, what's... Like, I was in shock. I got home that night, September 11th, and the machine was beeping.
You have a recording.
One of her co-workers.
Tuesday, 8 p.m. This is Linda Condon. I work with Carmen Rivera on the 96th floor fiduciary. I was with her. She was okay. I can tell you what she was wearing. She was fine because she comforted me. So, she's okay.
That's the message that I got. And that's, we're not giving up. What? She's out there somewhere.
I took a shower and went right back outside. Actually, my next door neighbor came with me because he was more familiar with Jersey and the hospitals.
All of New York City's hospitals have been pressed into service. Terry Sheridan is back with us now from St. Vincent's Hospital. What can you tell us, Terry?
Well, Catherine, in the past 3 hours, there's maybe only been 2 or 3 ambulances that have come.
Go to the front desk. They already knew, they had a line for the families. I would show them her picture, first of all, and say her name, to see if maybe she was in the psych ward or if she was just in the hospital. They would tell me, no, we have no one here that fits that description. I went to every hospital in the 5 boroughs and New Jersey. We looked, we asked. Nothing. Nothing. It was the same thing. I just kept on going. The 12th, 13, 14, that Saturday, I think I slept on the 15th. I think like my body couldn't take it anymore, so I had to sleep a little bit, and I just got back up, took a shower, back out there. I believed that she did make it out. And I just started printing posters and putting them everywhere. Everywhere.
Aaron, what you see behind me is a line of hundreds of people. All of them are missing relatives, and they're standing in line here to give information about their relatives to authorities. Authorities want to know everything about them. They also want dental records in case they need to identify bodies. They also want blood samples from close relatives in case they need to match DNA. I've never seen anything like this here. Families are handing out flyers to the media, hoping for some news on their relatives. Here, for example, Paul Ortiz is missing. He was on the 107th floor of the first tower. Darren Bohan was on the 102nd floor. Katie McGarry Nowak, she was a newlywed, gathered her friends together to show them a wedding, a video just the day before. Here we have Joseph Mistrulli. It says, God and angels up above, send us home, the one we love.
If anybody sees him or knows anything, his name is Andrew Stern. And
do you know that he even made it to work yesterday?
Yes.
You do know that?
He did go to work yesterday. He was in very early, about 7:30. So he was definitely there. So if anybody knows anything, please, his wife and his mother and the rest of us are all waiting to hear. Andrew Stern from Cantor Fitzgerald.
And your name is?
My name is Lisa Birch. I'm his sister.
Excuse me, my brother was on that floor. I have a brother also that's missing.
Okay.
He's Robert Slewax, his wife Susan. They're from Long Island. That's Robert. That is Robert. This is still Robert.
Sorry.
Aaron, I've been talking to these families for 2 days now, and all of these stories are very much like this. People are just hoping that their relatives are out there somewhere, and they're begging us to talk about them, to show their pictures, hoping that if someone's seen them, that they might be able to identify them and give some information. Aaron?
Put up about 3,000 posters all over New York. There wasn't a place I didn't put a poster. The green mailboxes or mailboxes on the corners, that as I'm putting up the picture, this is my mind, that I will get a tap on the shoulder saying I'm right here, you know? And that was nice. But that was my hope, that she would just come up behind me and just tap me and say, I'm right here. Because I truly felt in my heart that she was out there. And the hardest part was coming home after searching every day, and my kids waiting for me to tell them, you know, something, and not having any news.
Can you come to the house?
Racine, come up.
No.
Esta, Racine, esta es la nena mía grande.
How have you felt these days? Were you confused? Are you sad? Are you?
I don't know.
nothing else we can do.
And how old are you?
8.
8?
Hate losing her teeth.
But not her smile. No quiero ser pesimista ni nada, pero ¿has considerado, aunque sea la posibilidad de que tal vez ella no aparezca?
Hay un 2% que dice que me... hay un 2% que me dice que, todos los días que han pasado, pero hay un 98% que me dice que está viva. So, yo me voy con el 98%. Mi corazón no me dice que ella está muerta, o que ha fallecido. Yo sé que ella está viva. La cosa es encontrarla.
You gotta give up. This isn't good for you. This isn't healthy. You're giving your kids false hope. Like, I heard it all, and I didn't want to hear that. You know what? I'm not giving up. She wouldn't have gave up on me. I'm not gonna give up.
I remember I was 8 years old. I was so confused. This idea of someone flying a plane into my mother's building, and now she hasn't been home, and I don't think I understood what death was or terrorism or what could have happened. So I remember just hearing this, and my dad kept telling me, okay, we're gonna find her. You never know. We could be walking in the street and all of a sudden she walks by and we see her. She might not remember who we are, but she's there. She's out there and we're not gonna give up. My life as an 8-year-old completely changed. It was my father's full-time job looking for my mother, but now it was also ours. I remember on the weekends and the weekdays, we were all making signs, and that was what we did in our free time. We were making missing signs. We were making pins that we hung on our shirts and signs for our cars, and anything that you could put missing Carmen Rivera, we put.
I'm doing everything she wanted. My kitchen is being redone, the stainless steel look with the island in the middle. I'm doing everything just the way she wanted it. Her wooden floors. And hopefully if God gives her back to me one day, she is in a hospital somewhere, she comes home to what she wanted. You gotta watch your step here. There's 1, 2.
I didn't sleep. It was just coffee, and Red Bull had just come out back then, so it was coffee and Red Bulls. And that's what kept me going. Like, go home, take a shower, go right back out there, make more posters, and go right back out there.
It's okay, babe. You don't gotta cry because of that. Don't worry about it. Just go upstairs and grab Daddy's pillow, and me and you, we're gonna have a good time tomorrow, okay? Okay, don't worry. I'll make you feel better tomorrow, okay?
Brittany was not having a good time.
I love you so much. Give me a kiss.
There was times I would tell her to just sleep in my bed.
God bless you.
I'm all they have. And their biggest fear was losing me. And they didn't want to go to sleep until I was home.
Racine's Sweet 16, it was like so soon after her birthday is in November. It was so emotional, but it was exciting at the same time.
And we hope you guys have a good time.
I remember it was like as if we were trying to celebrate her birthday, but then at the same time, like there was something else there that was, it was so not just her birthday. It was definitely a heavy energy, but we all just tried to make the best of it. There wasn't just moments of highs. I remember us listening to songs and dancing in a circle. There was a table that had her picture on it, and I know she so badly wanted to be there and she couldn't. I was still adjusting to like this new life of not having her. I think at this point I was enjoying like the dancing, but I was still confused because we have the table and we're having these songs, and it's like, well, at this point we didn't know she was gone. So it was a very strange thing.
I just continued with the plans that she wanted. I didn't change anything that whatever she had set in place, I just did it. It was hard initially, like setting it up without her, but it went well, and we did it. And it was like, we felt like she was there.
I remember at that time with my dad is how strong he was with my mom leaving and him having to pick up as a single father and raise all three of us. Just being like a super dad. I now just think back to me as an 8-year-old and just wonder like how I ever did that. I just know it was because he was always there even when he wasn't here. And was looking for her and was always in the city and always putting up signs. I just remember him also being right there.
Everybody was telling me, you gotta give up, you know? She's not here. You need to move on. This isn't good for you or the kids. And I said, I am not taking, if that makes my kids feel better, her pictures being there, they are going to stay there. And I still have posters from the originals in my safe that I won't part. I can't get rid of them. As time went on, there was no body, so I did not want to accept that she was gone. And then around June 2002, they found some remains. It was a nightmare I didn't want to live, because I did not want to accept it until, I always said, up until they find something, I am not gonna believe that this really happened to her. And then, you know, it's reality hit, like she's no longer here. Oof. That was a hard day. When I got the phone call, "Are you alone?" And I was like, yes. This is the medical examiner's office. We would like for you to come down. And right there, that's when I just fell. I just fell on my knees, and I was like, no way, can't be, no way.
When you went to the medical office, what happened?
They just sent me in a little room and told me all the parts
That they found that match up. And what were these?
Part of the arm, part of the hip, part of the, from here down, from her toes, her foot.
My friend Scott Spellman and his best friend Tony, they like brothers. But Scotty speaks it like it is, and at that point I did. Before that, when it happened, I didn't want to hear that.
And you're curious to look at it to see if you could identify it. That's what
I don't know why I want to look at it.
Well, that's what I'm asking you, bro. You got to get it out of your head. So
Does she
you
have
know
any
what?
tattoos?
If you don't, and you close the box and she leaves, now you got to wonder the rest of your life.
This side?
Yeah.
Did you find the right side? But I can't believe that you can see anything anywhere. It's got to be decayed or did it tell
It's
you anything?
decomposed, but it was taken in the early stages of the whole thing. This
DNA.
guy, he's against me seeing it.
Bro,
Against you seeing the...
you're gonna be devastated. Do you understand that? You don't want to see this. It's not like you see her, you know. You don't want to.
Yeah, but you want to know something? You got. If this is bothering you, this is what I'm trying to bring out. If it's bothering you, you need to talk about this stuff. Understand? Tony's like the guy on the left, okay? I'm like the guy on the right.
Right. You're better off just talking about it and that's it.
I don't know. Maybe you need to see
I'll
it.
take you to the hospital, see some other parts, and see how you react to those.
You warmed up first.
I'm dead serious, bro.
We need this right now. We need some kind of closure.
Closure,
Well,
absolutely.
you have.
Right.
You don't have to do this yet.
I had to see it, which I don't think I should have, but I had to. And when I get down there, they have it in a vacuum sealed package, and the medical examiner grabs it and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Can I see it, please?" And it was hard, because to see her, give me a kiss, get out the car, open up the door again, give me another kiss, and then to hold in one little Ziploc. That was really hard. And then I knew that there's no more searching.
We're celebrating not anger, but the gift of God's life to Carmen. You know, that's what it's all about. And why did Carmen not make it?
Because she stood behind to help her coworkers.
She stopped to help people. You know, think about that. Carmen stopped to do what? To help other people. You know? Here you are in a building that's...
I found out that she had stayed behind to help her coworkers. Not wanting to leave anybody they knew.
No, they can't hear you.
Say it. I just got up there and spoke. You can speak too.
Dad, can I sit here?
No. It's face to me. We're not going to hear you. You got to talk loud.
A hero is someone who saves someone. My mom is a heroine. Every morning she would make breakfast and walk me to the bus stop. She also would volunteer to be a chaperone and do other things in my classroom. She is also a hero because she saved people and helped them down the stairs in the World Trade Center was attacked. She made people feel better and if they were scared. On that day,
I remember the day of my mother's funeral, reading my poem for my mom. I idolized just everything about her.
One person I know she saved was Linda Conlon. Linda was crying because she was so sad. She is now with her kids because my mom gave her the strength and courage to get out of the building. My mom is a real heroine. I love her. It is so important to have heroes in the
I
world.
remember people coming up to me because they remembered my face from going to work with her, and they were just telling me how much of a hero she was. She went back and she would just glide them down, and she would just kept saying, "It's gonna be okay, hon. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay." And that she just kept going up and down and just grabbing people and walking them down. And I think it's so amazing to think that that was my mom that decided in such a moment of terror that she wanted to stay back and help people and comfort them and do what she could.
I was actually angry. I was like, why wouldn't you just tell her, come on, Carmen, let's go? But she wouldn't have. That was Carmen. But again, you don't want to hear none of this. You don't want to hear it. You just want to hear she's okay, and that was not the case. That was reality. She was only 33. She was my best friend. We were happy. We were good. And like that, a big part of my life was taken. The cremation. That was hard. Because that was like really realizing she's not.
Okay, can we let him go? All right, let him go. Let him go. Yeah.
It's like there's no closure. It's been 19 years, but it still feels like yesterday. They found her wallet. It was in 2003. 6 blocks away on a roof. And this is what was left of her wallet. With all her IDs. Wow, I never noticed a piece of her hair. Right there. "19 years later, they still doing DNA samples on the people to see who they were. I could get a phone call tomorrow saying that they found more. You know, they asked you, if we find more, would you like for us to notify you? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I want as much of her as I can get.
I went to the same college as she did. I do work in Manhattan. I do work in finance like she did. I live in a building facing the World Trade Center, so I wake up every morning to her in my view. I find myself sometimes when I'm commuting to work or navigating the city or getting overwhelmed, I just always think of how she was in that moment, and even before that moment, how she was as a woman, as a parent, as a friend, sister, everything. And I try to use that to push me forward. And it's always been my goal, and now I'm still to this day trying to do that. I'm trying to be just like her in everything I do.
It's hard. Even though I'm married again and I have a new family, it's hard. But I know she's still with us, and she's watching my kids and my grandkids. and she's proud of everything that they've accomplished.
This is my grandma.
And I see her through my kids.
She's my angel now because she passed away.
That's beautiful. Well, that's a beautiful picture of her, and I'm so glad you shared her with us. She's so special. And you kind of look like her. I must be honest, you do. You have her smile. Let's see it. Oh, there it is.